let's create some ladders. So I will add a new sprite by double clicking on an empty spot. Go to this sprite category here. Let's just click somewhere to begin with, and then I will load an image file, and here's the ladder file. And let's improve the collision polygon a little bit. You can delete these extra points that you don't need by right clicking. I will just right click and select delete, and for this one as well, delete. And I think I'm not going to make this super accurate. I'm just going to eyeball it for now. There's also one extra point that we don't really need. Something like that should be fine. And I will close this down. And this is a little bit big, so let me just scale it down a little bit. And let's see where we want to create a climbing possibility. Maybe here. So let's add a couple of ladders like that, so the player can climb up. Okay, and let's maybe create some other places for climbing as well. Maybe let's make one here. Maybe like that. And one more place for climbing. There's that one. Maybe you can make it here. Actually, let's make it next to the platform. Something like that, I think. Alright, I'm going to name this sprite ladder. And let's create some events for it. So we'll head to the event sheet, and let's count this to be part of the player movement. So I will go to the player group and I will press S to create a sub event for the group. And we want to check if the player is overlapping the ladder. So there's this condition that says that lets us see if we are overlapping with another object. So let's choose that one, and then we simply select the ladder. Okay. And if that's true, then we want to remove the gravity. So we don't want the player to fall if he's on the ladder. So let me add an action for the player, and let's go to the platform category here, and then we are simply going to say set gravity, and we are going to set it to 0. As you can see, if I select the player, we can see that by default the gravity is 1500. When we set it to 0, then our player won't fall down anymore. So let's see how that works. So if we jump here, when we jump on top of the ladder, then the gravity disappears, and now we go up into the sky and never come back. So we don't want the player to shoot up like that, so let's fix that part. Now we only set the platform gravity to 0, and when the player was still moving, then the 0 gravity kind of allowed him to move very high. So let's also, when the player is overlapping the ladder, let's trigger once. Here's an event that is often handy. We don't want to have this next event happen all the time while the player is overlapping the ladder. So we don't want to have it happen over and over again. We want the next event to fire only the first time this condition is true. And for that we can use a sub event called trigger once while true. So I will press S to add a sub event for this event where we are checking the overlap. And I want to go to the system category, and here maybe I'll write it in the search box, trigger, and here we can find this trigger once while true. And if I hit done, then I can add an action here that will stop the player basically. So we want to set the vector y to be 0, and maybe we'll also set vector x to be 0. So vector x, they are both 0. So let's see how that works out. Okay. So now we can see that the player stops, but actually this is not working very well either. So the player is not moving up, and also we are not turning the gravity back on when he's not overlapping the ladder. So let's fix maybe the gravity thing first. And maybe I'll make a comment here by pressing Q, just write ladder. So if player is overlapping ladder, we're setting the platform gravity to 0. But else, if that's not the case, then we want to set the platform gravity back to 1500. So let's add this else, and then I'm going to copy this action, paste it in here, and then I'm going to double click and change the number back to 1500. Let's see how that looks. So when we overlap the ladder, we stop and are in the air, and then when we are not overlapping the ladder, then we can fall down again. Okay, so that's all good, and we want to make it possible to get up the ladder. So at the moment when I'm pressing up, nothing is happening. So let's fix that next. Now, because this is not really part of the standard platform behavior anymore, now we need to add a keyboard object into our project so that we can recognize the certain key presses. So let's go to our layout here, and I'm going to double click on an empty spot to add an object, and I want to add the keyboard. It's inside the input category here. So I'm going to select the keyboard, and now that I have the keyboard object, you can't really see it anywhere here. Where you can see it is inside the project. Here it's now inside the object types folder, but where we can really use it is inside the event sheet here. So let's go inside this event that is checking if we are overlapping the ladder, and let's add another sub event here. So I'm going to press S, and what I want to do is I want to check if a certain key is pressed. So let me select the keyboard, and here we have this condition that says on key pressed. So I'm going to double click to select that one, and then I can select the key that I want to monitor. So I'm going to click here once, and now I can just press a key, and I want to check if the up arrow is pressed. Okay, so I pressed up arrow on my keyboard, then I'm going to hit OK, and done. So okay, so if the player is pressing up, what should happen? Well, we want to move the player up, which means let's go to add action, select our player, and go to our platform here. We want to set the Y vector to be negative. Okay, so I will select Y vector, and let's try something like minus 600. Let's see how that works. So now when we are pressing the up button and we are overlapping the ladder, we can move up. So that's cool. But on the other hand, now he's moving all the way up when I press the up arrow, and I would like him to stop when I stop pressing the arrow. So let's add some more into this. I will go to the event sheet, and let's also check while the player is overlapping the ladder, let's create another sub event and see if a key is released. So on key released, let's see if the up arrow is released, and if it's released, we want to again set the platform vector to be 0. So let's see how that's going to work. I just copy pasted that in there. So let's play. Now it should only move upwards while I'm pressing up, and that is working, as we can see. And now we want to do a similar thing for the down arrow, and I think we also want to put the player on front of the ladder. So let's send the ladder. Let's go here to the layout and select the ladder object, and right click on top of it here and set order, and let's send it to the bottom of the layer so that the player is always on top of it. Okay, and now let's add the down arrow events. So here we have if the up arrow is pressed, we move the player up, and when the up arrow is no longer pressed, or in other words it's released, then we stop the player. I think we can just copy these two events, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and then we are simply going to change this to be the down arrow. So I'm going to double click here, and I'm going to click on the key selection and press down. And I will do the same thing for this one. So let's select the down arrow instead of the up arrow, hit done, and now we want to change these numbers. This should be +600, so the player goes down, and this can stay the same. We still want the player to stop when the down arrow is released. Let's see how that works. So now we can go up or we can go down, and we can get off the ladder and then we will get the gravity back. So now it's working quite nicely.